Well, Coach, well, thanks for coming back. I did, I did the podcast of the 1978 Annandale Adams, and it was one of the most successful ones I've ever done in terms of views and likes and feedback. People really enjoyed hearing the stories about the Annandale Adams. And obviously you were, the star quarterback of that team, and then ended up having a fine career down at Virginia Tech, and then having an incredible coaching career. So I was anxious to get you back on here and maybe talk about some of the issues, and especially about football as compared to when you played. So anyway, I'm glad you decided to come back and do this again.
Oh, hey, that's my pleasure.
Yeah,
it's an honor.
Yeah, well, thanks, Coach. So let's again. I remember your family was from Northern Virginia, so you didn't. I know some of the guys I remember, and they moved in. They actually found out Annandale was a great football program. Your family is from Northern Virginia area?
Middle school.
Okay, middle school. Oh.
It was around the middle school times, but actually it's a little different story, but it's kind of the same. My dad worked here in Northern Virginia. We lived in Tennessee. And I don't know if he shopped around, but if you lived in the area, you knew the background of Annandale, especially if you were in athletics back then. And so he rented a house. He moved us up from Tennessee because he used to travel back and forth on weekends. And he moved us up from Tennessee eventually, and put us in Annandale district. And that's, I guess he probably did know what school would be best for me to go to as I got older. But even though I was middle school time, I was thankful that he did.
Yeah. What part of Tennessee did you guys live in?
Around the Bristol area, okay. Kingsport, Tennessee. Yeah. That's where that was most of my childhood was down there.
Yeah, it's a great sports area, especially it's a great basketball area. That part of the world, surprisingly so. So, did you have siblings, or did your parents play sports?
I did. Well, my dad, believe it or not, he actually had a major league tryout for baseball. Mm-hmm. My brother played baseball. My mom played basketball when it was back in half court days, in dresses and skirts. And everybody in our family is pretty athletic. Yeah.
Well, one thing that's very interesting about Annandale, we didn't really talk about this much in the first podcast, was Annandale was almost completely white. It was almost, they called it the All-American City, and today it is. You couldn't have a more diverse area, and beautifully so in a lot of ways. But for football, it could be a little bit of a challenge if you're trying to put together a football program. What's of Annandale that was particularly conducive to having great teams?
Well, I don't know that the ethnic makeup of the players on the team would have made any difference. You've learned a lot about the Annandale tradition. It was a lot of team aspect. Be proud of your teammates, your school, and but then again, it has changed a lot. I think we had when I was playing Annandale, we had one black guy on the team. Was Tommy Mason, and he actually ended up going to I believe Garfield, transfer. But it was kind of I wouldn't say a cultural awakening for us, because we would go play schools that it was at GW Danville. It was at teams in the playoffs that and even when I was coaching at Annandale, we played Hampton in the playoffs, and that was a surprise for our kids to be playing an all African American football team. But things weren't treated, when you're on the field, things weren't treated any differently. Yeah. You're going to get after it. It doesn't matter who it is. And but nowadays, my sister went there, my older sister, went to Annandale, but nowadays you're right. It is more minorities than certainly than it was then. And when I was at Falls Church, I took over the head coaching job at Falls Church. Falls Church was a 70% minority. And I will say that, I had kids miss a game because of immigration hearings. And so it was a challenge, but also at the same time, it was also very rewarding.
Yeah. Yes. I went to Robinson after you. So I was class of 84. And there were a few, Robinson's probably 2 or 3% Black. So it was more than Annandale. And we had, the Black students, a lot of us were overrepresented on the sports teams, the basketball and the football teams. But we could play Woodson. Yeah, I remember when I played against Tommy Amaker, we were the only 2 Black players in the gym. I think they had a they had a head cheerleader that was Black as well. But it is interesting how things have changed. And I remember when we played TC Williams, or even when we played South Lakes, we played a lot of Black players, and it was an adjustment. Or we'd play summer league against teams in DC. Nowadays, it's interesting. Kids have no fear, or there's no big deal about playing city teams, or it's so normal to them. When we played, especially in basketball, it was an adjustment because the teams in the city played differently than we played. They were more athletic. They were tougher than us. It was different.
Yeah, that reminds me, because I did play basketball too in high school.
That's right.
And imagine Annandale, all white, going to play. I believe it was Garfield. No, it was. I don't know if it was Gar. I don't remember if it was. I think I'm pretty sure it might have been Garfield. They had some pretty good Black athletes back then. Well, warm-ups, they're all dunking, and we're just doing the old school layups, and we're like, holy cow, we lost about 50 points. But that was a surprise for us.
Yeah, it's definitely a cultural change. Well, you talked a little bit in the first podcast about you played for the YMCA Buckskins, and I guess it was a great football program. And who did you play baseball for? Because I know that I read somewhere that one of the reasons why you went to Tech was that you wanted to be able to play baseball as well. So obviously you must have been a high level baseball player. So who did you grow up playing baseball with?
Well, I played for Coach Carter at Annandale. Like I said, my dad had opportunities to play Major League Baseball, but he was married, and that wasn't a good idea for my mom. And my brother had a short stint at George Mason. So there was never a time that my dad, he coached my little league teams. There was never a time that he wasn't, hitting me ground balls or playing catch or something. So I was on Annandale's team, varsity, as a freshman for Coach Carter.
You're a pitcher?
No, actually, well, I started there, but I had bad knees. And actually, he tried me at catcher too, but I ended up playing shortstop and third base. And my first year I wasn't playing that much, but we had a little tussle with Stewart High School, and the catcher got suspended, and the shortstop had to play catcher. So he put me in as a freshman at shortstop at Annandale. And I think I probably have the record for the most errors in a single game. I had like 9 errors. So it was new, but it was, when you're a little freshman playing on varsity, it's kind of, and it's overwhelming, and you're oblivious to actually what is going on. You're just out there to play, and that's the way it was. And that's kind of the way it was in football too, my first couple of years.
Now, baseball was probably more serious back then, because we got to remember in the 70s, football became America's number one sport, America's pastime, but baseball had been before. And so I assume baseball was really serious here at the time. So
it was.
Were you a football first kind of person, or you just played whatever was in season?
Well, I had, my summer ball, I had a Cincinnati Reds scout approach me. This was during high school, and asked if I'd be interested in playing baseball. And, it was probably a mistake. And what I said to him was, this was kind of, I had already been, recruited by some schools for football. And I told him, I said, I've already committed to football, so I'm just going to stay with football. So there may have been an opportunity, I don't know, but that was one thing that I checked with Virginia Tech, and the coach did say that yes, we do have players that do both. You have that opportunity if you want to play baseball as well. And so that was actually one of the reasons why I picked Tech. But then when I got there and you're on scholarship for one sport and you got spring ball coming, they come to you and say, for your own best interest, it'd probably be good that you went to spring football instead of baseball. Yeah. So I never really did get the opportunity. Yeah. But there was this excellent player at Virginia Tech, basketball player, Dale Curry, who, after he finished up his eligibility with basketball, he went out and pitched and started his the spring after his senior year, after his last year. Yeah, no, he was a heck of a pitcher. So he had the opportunity to do two sports. I just never really had the opportunity.
Well, in basketball, Annandale has some really good players in the mid to late 80s. They had a set mid to late 70s. They had the Leonards, and I'm friends with Keith Leonard, and the younger one, or at least I think the middle one, maybe. They also had the guy who played at George Washington, 6'6" guy, played GW University. I can't remember his name, but you guys had quite a bit of talent on the basketball court too.
Well, and don't forget Phil Denfeld was on the basketball team.
That's right, Phil was there too. Yeah,
we actually had some really good players on the basketball team. And in my class, we had Chris Weiler, who played wide receiver for Navy, who's a buddy of mine still. He was on the basketball team as well. So yeah, there was back then you had a lot more of your athletes playing multiple sports.
Yeah, I like what you said in the first podcast. If they got the best of you in football, you get them back in the basketball.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, that's what I like about the kids that play multiple sports is you're not going to get those guys twice in back-to-back seasons. And that's the last thing we want to do is lose in football and then lose again in basketball or baseball or any other sport. Mm-hmm. And it's the competitiveness that you want to see in the athletes. And I think nowadays it's become more of an individualized thing instead of a teammate thing.
Yeah. Well, one thing I also learned about you is that your varsity debut was as a freshman and against Robinson. I guess your starting quarterback at Annandale had gotten hurt, so that must have been the fall of '77. And was that Ed Henry's Robinson team? And who was on
it? Was Ed Henry's, yes.
Who was on the Robinson team?
Who was on the Robinson team? Well, at that time, the only one that I knew, because I was a little freshman, was the quarterback Todd Curley.
Right. Uh-huh.
So, and I've actually spoke to him a couple of times because he went to UVA, and he was, and they had a great year that year. He was real good to me. I like Todd, and but that's really, I mean, being a quarterback, you're going to know who the other quarterback is on the other team. So he was really the only one, but that was a special moment because I had no clue what was going on. I was a little freshman, just playing catch on the sideline, and the quarterback gets hurt, and they're yelling for me. I'm like, why is everybody yelling for me? And I had to go in the game. At that time, I didn't have a chance to get nervous, which was great. I just ran out on the field and started taking the snaps, listening to what the coach said, and probably worked out better than I didn't know that I was going to have to play.
How many people were at the game? Like probably 5,000 or 6,000 people were there?
Yeah. Back then at the games, not just Robinson, but a lot of the other games too. The bleachers are full, and there's standing room around the fence in the end zones. It was always packed. That was it was the thing to do for the communities on the weekend on Friday nights,
Right.
which was one reason why I went to Battlefield. Coaching at Woodson and Falls Church, a lot. Some of the parents that really didn't go attend all the games. It wasn't a priority. But out here in this community, there was a great community out here. Didn't have a school, didn't have athletics. They had to travel to Stonewall, which was Stonewall then, and that was the only other school. So I would actually have people, coaching out here at Battlefield, I'd have old timers stop me after the game and say, I used to come watch you at Annandale, and they live out this way now. And then because we don't have anybody go to Battlefield, but we just want to come watch the games.
Yeah, I talked to Coach Randall Bills a couple of times this year, and when his team went to the state final, I went down there and watched, and he did have great crowd support. And I saw his game against Patriot, unbelievable rivalry. So they do have a great enthusiasm for sports. I'm not sure if football is like that now, but basketball, they're still pretty crazy about the basketball out there.
Well, when we went to the playoffs, as state semifinal, it might have been just a regional final, but it was a state semifinal. Well, yeah, we had a good crowd travel down to the beach area for the game. So that's one thing. When a lot of times when we play in the football games, we go to visiting teams and we have more fans than they do, which is nice. And a lot of schools like to play us because they get the ticket receipts, because we always bring a good crowd with us, and not just football, but like you said, basketball, all sports do.
Coach, get back to that Robinson game. How rare is it? Do you see a freshman quarterback in big schools? I'm sure it happens with the single A schools or whatever, but how often do you see a freshman or even a sophomore starting at the quarterback on a big program? It's something I haven't seen very often through the years.
Well, sophomores not nearly as rare. You don't find a freshman unless you're just a small school that doesn't have a whole lot of athletes, and you take your best athlete, who might end up being a freshman. But if you remember when we won states, we had Ryan Swingle, who was a sophomore. And if you can find that situation, that means you still have a couple more years after that year. That's what, when I go out there to coach, and even with Coach Hatfield now, I'm looking for that sophomore that we can have for 3 years.
Yeah.
Because it makes a heck of a difference when the quarterback is in his third year, second year, knows the offense, knows what you're like, knows what you're expecting, and can understands the offense after a couple of years, that he can make changes himself, which doesn't happen in high school much. High school quarterbacks aren't checking at the line of scrimmage much. They're just looking over the sideline for calls, telling what to do. But it's nice to have a quarterback that's been in the system for that amount of time, to where they can think on their own too, and they know what you want. It makes such a huge difference.
Yeah. Well, we talked a lot about Coach Bob Hardage, your Annandale coach, on the last podcast, and what was his approach to a young quarterback? Now, he was very much a disciplinarian, which everyone was in those days. I don't think he was. I don't mean that as a criticism. I mean that it was kind of an old school type of mentality with football coaches. But how did he treat a young quarterback who was, you had some big personalities. I can even tell in the call we had, you had some big personalities to deal with. So what was his approach?
I don't. Well, I'll tell you the way it started was, I was just, my dad and I guess my dad drove me up to a 2-a-day practice at Annandale, my 9th grade year. We were just in the stands watching. And Coach Hardage walked up to me and says, "You play football?" And I said, "Yes." He said he had heard about me in 8th grade, but and he said, "Why don't you come out?" And he looked at me, he goes, "You look like a quarterback." He goes, "Why don't you come out and practice?" And so I did. But even when it's starting off, I was like, I was like second, third string JV.
Mm.
And I wasn't going to play as a freshman. But then just, I don't know. I guess it was just, he didn't treat me any differently than the rest of the players. I actually just learned a lot from just being there as a ninth grader. Yeah, you're learning what the other quarterbacks are doing, and Michael, that was one of them. Just watching the older guys, and of course, you're very intimidated by everything that's going on. But everybody that was in front of me, either quit or got hurt, and it had to go through. The backup quarterback on varsity ends up quitting. Then the starter in the Robinson game gets hurt. We had another one quit. So I would have played the JV quarterback, but they ended up to where he had no choice to have me on varsity. So, but he didn't treat me any differently. Now the players, that's different.
Yeah,
it was tough. Back then, it was okay to pick on people, and they're certainly going to pick on the little ninth grader. So not maliciously, just it kind of, I wouldn't say an initiation, but they had fun with me, and that was for sure.
now my recollection of how you described Coach Hardage and how your teammates described him was take care of the little things first. Your offense and defense seem to be very I don't want to say basic, but it was just kind of a Vince Lombardi, just execute. Your playbook didn't seem huge the way you were describing it. Do you think a guy like Bob Hardage would have been a coach in today's generation, and would he have been successful today?
Well, yes, he would be successful. And he would win a lot of games. And he'd have kids that were responsible, took care of business, went to class, good citizens, good for the school. But at the same time, he'd probably have some parents not happy because, and the community, because, they want to see the spread offenses, the flashy stuff, the really nice uniforms. More of a show than it was actually a football game, a lesson for the kids. I mean, he was all about teaching lessons to the kids, while he's coaching the game. So yes, he would have won a lot of games because there's no one going to be fundamentally any better than that team. They're going to know what they're supposed to do. So there'd be no doubt about winning games. He would still be winning games. But he'd have people, hey, coach, why don't we throw the ball more? Why don't we do this? Why don't we play shotgun more? There'd be a lot of that. And which I got, that's one reason why they probably happy to see me retire. Because let me put it this way. I've had tight ends all district every year I've been a head coach because no one else has them. I mean, we had some really good ones. There'd be occasional one now and then. But we would have tight ends, and that's one thing we built our offenses around, which back in Annandale, when we won the state championship, I had two tight ends. One like 6'5", 6'6", and the other one 6'7". Mm-hmm. I mean, they were just like Phil was one of them. Yeah, he definitely would be successful, and he would teach a lot of good character to kids. But then he would have to deal with them. Hey, coach, why don't we change the offense?
So going into your sophomore year, which was the record-breaking year, the year that you guys won the state championship, were considered national champions. Was there a lot of pressure coming into that season? Did you guys know how special you were going to be?
I think, well, maybe more so for the older guys because they had been in the Annandale program longer than me. But I don't recall there being anybody nervous or because Coach Hardage instilled and preached so much, like you mentioned, do the little thing, take care of business, do what you're supposed to do, know your assignment, and everything will be fine. So I don't think, I can't recall that I was nervous, because to me, it was another day going out there and doing what I was asked to do for the team, for the teammates, for Annandale. I never really got nervous, and I don't think there was too many guys that did. It was more of, we have a job and let's go do it.
Yeah. Well, you have this phenomenal year, which we covered in pretty much in pretty good detail on that last interview. And then afterwards, most of those guys graduated. You had a lot of top players graduated. So what happened in 1979? So what was that year like? Yours junior year. You probably were becoming a recruit, a target for recruiters, college recruiters. So what was the next year like?
Well, we still had very good years. We still were making the playoffs, and one of our big rivalries was West Springfield. They had
Jack Brooks
at tailback. No one could catch him. So we had a lot of success and I'll never forget that that year when they had Jack Brooks. I think he was the same year I was. We played them in the playoffs, and I went the wrong way and gave up a safety, tackled in the end zone. We lost by 2. So that was one that I'll never forget. But we had, it's not like we won states and then when we struggled to make playoffs, we didn't do well. We were still in the playoffs. Played I think it's my junior year, we played Mount Vernon. Had a great team, had all those running backs that they had.
Derek Steele, probably.
Yeah, the Steels. Yep. We lost to them in the playoffs, but they were a pretty good team. So we still had a lot of success. But we didn't have. We didn't have what that state championship team had, and that was. We had some really good players, but like I said, very competitive. We were in playoffs all the time. Just not the level that we had for that one year, and a couple of years in previous history at Annandale.
Yeah. Well, then you decided to go to Virginia Tech, and as I mentioned earlier, I had read somewhere that baseball was involved in the decision. What other schools did you consider? And what was Blacksburg like in the early 1980s?
Well, I actually, I don't want to sound arrogant. There was a lot of options. Mm-hmm. I went visit North Carolina, Indiana. I had visits set with Pitt. Stanford wanted me to come out there and take a visit. Georgia. There was plenty of options, but at the same time, I was thinking family. I had, actually, let me tell you a little story. At Pitt, when they were talking to me, they said, if you have a good year, your first year, we redshirt you the second year, because they want you around. See, back then, you actually stayed in college your full time. But none of this go 2 years and then go to the NFL. But they said that we redshirt you, that way you still have 4 more years. So actually that'd be 3 more years. So that was the way they ran their program. They said, right now we have this kid named Marino that's redshirt in his redshirt year. But and so I had lots of opportunities, and it was eye-opening to go. I was just a little, I wasn't a Southern boy, but I was just a hometown Annandale who hadn't seen a whole lot of things, but it was a lot of fun going and visiting schools. And my dad went to, and mom. But when it came down to it, most of my family relatives are from the southwestern part of Virginia, and I had local grandmother and aunt and uncles like 45 minutes, hour away from Blacksburg, and it's easy for my parents to get down to games. the state of Virginia, UVA wasn't very good at the time, so I wasn't going to go there. So I ended up, because of family reasons, and they had a good program. Even, they were independent, but they were a good program at that time under Bill Dooley. And that's the reason why I went to Blacksburg, because it's local. My parents, my family games, and I had relatives that in the area. So, and I think it was the best decision for me.
It's interesting that you mentioned UNC. So, we don't really think of UNC as a football program now, even though they have good teams at times. Mac Miller coached there, they've been decent. But when I was at UVA and when you were at Tech, UNC was a great football program. It was before Florida State was in the ACC. So UNC and Clemson were the class of the conference, and they had a tremendous amount of Northern Virginia players that went to UNC. There was Carl Carr, there was Burmeister, guy I knew at Robinson named Tommy Osborne. UNC did a lot of recruiting up in Northern Virginia back then.
They did, and well, they recruited heavily in Northern Virginia, and they came and watched my baseball games in the springtime. They heavily recruited the area, and I remember Danny Burmeister. It's I don't know why they were up here, but maybe they were a little smart enough that, hey, Tech's not getting the players out of Virginia, UVA's not getting the players out of Virginia. Well, you talked to Phil and went to Wake Forest. And him and Jim Hatch went down to Wake Forest. So those schools were coming up to Virginia to get players.
Yeah. And University of Maryland did pretty well in the suburbs as well, better than UVA.
Yeah.
So you what was you mentioned Bill Dooley, your coach. I don't know much about Bill Dooley. What was he like as a coach? What was his personality? What was he like? And then what did you learn from him that you used later on as a coach yourself?
You know what, Julie, I'm going to tell you that when you get to college, it's a whole lot different, and you know that. It's no longer. Unfortunately, it becomes a little bit more of an alumni thing. At the time I was at Tech, Coach Dooley was also the athletic director and the head coach. They stopped that after.
Yeah, I haven't heard that in years. Anyone doing that?
No. That didn't work out so well. Not for him either. But when you get, I loved my college coaches but I would say that most kids that you talk to that played in both, they'll go back to the coaches that they had in high school. Because I think at that time of the kids' lives, that was the most influential time. And they learn, I would say that the kids probably learn more from their high school coach than they did their college coach, other than, the X's and O's. And when you get to college, it becomes, I always felt like it was more of a business than teaching the kids about the game of life, football, everything. Yeah. And when you experience it, you see kids that, great kids. I had a kid that went there from Annandale, Chris Brown. And he was playing safety, had 2 interceptions in the spring game, but he was a walk-on. You know how the walk-on deal goes. Come fall, when all the new recruits are in, you're back down at 5th string. That's kind of the way it is. The kids it's not always fair in college. I don't want to say anything bad about Coach Dooley. He gave me lots of opportunities, and his one thing that he had going for him, which you can't do anymore, is his recruiting pitch was that if you are helping the program and contributing and working towards an education, we'll continue to keep paying. So that sometimes, that's one reason why I ended up not being an athletic director for, that's the reason why they stopped that. But and we all, I mean, there's a lot of us kids that were told that, and that happened for us. I was at Tech for 6 years. It was, but we were always, all of us were coaching. We were like graduate assistants, but hadn't graduated yet. We were all red-shirted. That's 5 years there. And then they kept us on to help coach. It was 6 years. And he was flipping the dime for it, which wasn't legal. But they would put us on, they would find a way to have it paid for us. And we greatly appreciated that. Not many, well, you can't say it anymore, but how many coaches were going to say, as long as you're helping the program and working towards an education, then we will continue to pay. So they put us all to work. I mean, I never broke. I tell you what, that's what made me a better coach. Was I sat in the room, my dorm room, breaking down film, filling out the scouting report sheets that they could put in the computer every week. I learned a whole lot, defenses, offenses. So that's, made a big difference for me.
Yeah.
But Coach Dooley, he was a great coach. He's one of the most successful coaches in college football, if you go back and check his records. And Virginia Tech was successful, multiple ball games when they were independent, before they went to, I guess it's Big East, and then to the ACC. But he's very successful, and I enjoyed playing for him. And look, you got to appreciate somebody that's going to keep you at school for 6 years and use you. So I'm grateful.
Yeah. Well, so you redshirted your first year, and I believe, is that correct?
Yeah, I found that out in my 5th year, but yeah. It's like, it was one of those deals. You didn't play your first year. I think I was in, and I don't even know if they count one or two games. My first year, I was, I may have gotten in 1 or 2 games just for, mop up duty. And then my, going into my last year of eligibility, said, hey, your first year is the redshirt year. You want to come back another year? And I wasn't ready to graduate. He says, yeah, sure, I'll come back. So I did get redshirted, technically.
Okay. So this is something, so Todd Greenwood, the late Todd Greenwood, he was a quarterback that you ended up, you started more than he did, but he did get some playing time. He did start occasionally as well, and did have, I think your 5th year, your senior year, I guess, he did play more. Why didn't they redshirt him and make you guys a year apart so that when you graduated, he would have been around? And what was your relationship with him? He was a quarterback, I think, from maybe near the northern area. Yeah.
Who Todd was from down in North Carolina.
Okay.
I think it was Greenville area. Todd was a great guy. Todd and we got along great, and I had no beefs with you see quarterbacks talking on the sidelines like they're asking each other questions about helping each other out during games. That's the way Todd and I were. We no animosity between either one of us. And you learn that when you get, like I said, college is a whole different thing. You learn that when you get to college, that it's an unfortunate situation that you have to be pitted against each other when you could be best friends. But that's just the way it is when you get to the competitive level of college, when kids have scholarships and kids don't. And you got other influences, but Todd and I got along great. And we understood that it's not either one of us. There's no reason for us to be bitter towards each other because we really don't control it. We were very similar in I guess I would say, and ability and talent level. So yeah, no, Todd and I got along great. We did, but your question was about redshirting. I don't know why. Maybe because Todd was graduating and I didn't yet. So I'm sure that was it.
Yeah.
But that's the reason why he didn't stick around. But no, we got along great, and you don't find that very often. And we understood that it really wasn't either one of our doing as to who was playing and who wasn't. There was other influences as to who was playing at certain times, and but I love Todd. He was a great guy.
Well, your statistics are very similar, and you both did well. You both completed like 55% of your passes, very solid quarterback rating. So how would Dooley decide which one you guys were going to play? It seems like either one of you guys would do great.
Julian, you bring up some tough questions to answer. I'll tell you, I don't know. I honestly don't know how he, pick one over the other, and it did switch, it did change around some. But I'll tell you one story, and I'll leave it at that. I was starting, and next thing you know, game time, Todd's going in. I had no reason, I had no idea why, especially when I'd been practicing all week. So I sat outside on the Monday news press conference that they do. It's either Sunday or Monday. I sat outside of the news when Coach Dooley was answering questions, talking about the upcoming game, that kind of thing for the week coming up. I sat outside of it, and he told the reporters that I had injured my finger in warm-ups and I wasn't able to play, which I knew good and well that didn't happen, and I had no, and so we're just going to leave it at that. There was other issues, and that maybe I was on his bad side for that week. I don't know, but there was just other things that contributed that Todd and I knew had nothing to do with either one of us, and we just did the best we could, and we had no animosity towards each other at all.
Right. And I think one of your teammates was Bruce Smith, right? At Tech. What kind of guy was? I had watched Bruce play basketball in the state final against the Robert E. Lee team, now Lewis, that in '81 that won the state against Booker T. I'll never forget that, because anyone that ever watches him play basketball, it's just like a bull in a china shop. He was just so huge and didn't have the best hands in the world, but he would throw his body around. But what was he like as a football teammate?
Well, actually, Bruce and my history go back to the Virginia State All-Star game. He was on the opposing team, but at the time, he was on the East and I was on the West team. We were playing against each other. We both knew we were going to Tech. I'd never met the guy before, and that was probably one of the scariest moments I had in high school, was him walking into my dorm room, because the game was at Virginia Tech. Him walking in there, and he just started getting into me. He was trying to scare me, not because of the All-Star game, just because he was going to be a Hokie too, and he was giving me the hardest time he could. I was like, holy cow, this guy's huge. And so we had a loving rivalry from there on. And I would always give him I always told him, I said, Bruce, I made you as good as you were because you were chasing my little white butt around all over the place trying to hit me. And Bruce is a great guy. And I will say that he has always treated me well, and we had some good times together.
Did you reconnect when you played for the Redskins?
No. Occasionally back down at school, but after he finished playing, and he would come back occasionally when he was playing, and I was still hanging on at Tech to help coach and be a graduate assistant. So other than that, and seeing him back at some events at Tech, that's really all I've seen. But He is, I can only speak for how he treated me, and he was treating me great. And I knew, it's like it's, I would say best buddy, but it's like your buddy who you just like to pick on, give each other a hard time. But then after it's all said and done, you're like, man, that guy was actually pretty cool. And he was.
Yeah. Who were your big rivals in those days? I know at UVA, we considered Tech our biggest game of the year. I remember, I think my freshman year or sophomore year, we beat you guys down there. And we tore the goalpost down. You may have already been graduated.
No. I'll never forget the day that UVA tore down our goalpost. So, I mean, I might have been coaching at that time. I think I was. That was like my 6th year.
Yeah.
I'll never forget it. There was more going on in the stadium after the game than there was during the game. And there was a picture in the local paper of one of our trainers holding a pylon, hitting somebody with it after the game. So no, that was some crazy times, UVA games.
Yeah.
But our biggest rivalry, well, that was pretty big, but was West Virginia.
West Virginia.
They had really good teams.
Danny Bugs?
Yeah. Well, they had their defense was ranked. Actually, their whole team was ranked, I think, up around 3 at the time we played them in Morgantown. And it was never a fun trip to go play in Morgantown. Yeah. And it was and I learned afterwards that it was just tradition that on Friday nights that they would circle the hotel and just honk their horns for a long time in the middle of the night, just to keep you up. But I did not enjoy going to West Virginia because we lost to them, and it wasn't even a close game. In between Todd and I, we got sacked 11 times. So they had a great defense. That was why am I thinking Stottlemyre?
I think so.
But that was they had some really good games, really good teams back then.
And Don Nealon was their coach, right?
Don Nealon was the coach, yes. And he actually came to my house and sat down with me and my parents, trying to talk me into going to West Virginia. But the problem was he called me Mike Cox the whole time he was there. I was like, because the coaches just get who the blue chippers are back then, and they talk to them. They find out, and I guess they still do nowadays. They find out who everybody else is recruiting, and they got to get in on it too. But he didn't know my name while he was sitting there talking to me, so that wasn't even an option.
Yeah. Well, look, you graduate from Tech, and I took you a little bit, 5 or 6 years on the Bill Dooley plan. But you did some coaching at the college level, and then when you look back on your own coaching career, are there things that you would have liked about being a college assistant with the opportunity, hopefully one day, have been a college coach, or did you enjoy the high school coaching at high school level better?
Well, I don't want to say that college left a bad taste in my mouth, but when I had the workout with the Redskins, the opportunity, and when they told me that that they didn't see it happening, but they had some other things that I could work on. They could go to Canada, and they had a relationship with the team in Canada, and I was like, no, I'd always felt that my better years were when I was younger, but I also didn't want to be like all the graduating players that just continue to try year after year after year to make it in the NFL. And I just wanted to move on because I thought my best days were done. And the coach was a tight end coach, Henning.
Not Dan Henning.
Well, Dan Henning actually was his son played at Annandale. No, it wasn't Henning. I can't remember his name now. But he said to me, he goes, if you want to coach in college, start in college. Don't think you can go to high school and move yourself up, because that's not going to happen very easily. I said, I just want to coach in high school, because I had the taste in my mouth that in college, like I said earlier, it was too much of a business. And that's why college coaches bounce around. I didn't want to do that. Uh, he's, it was a business in college, and I felt like my high school coaches made the most impact on me. So that's the reason why I like to go back to high school level, just be a PE teacher, work with the kids and teach them as much as I could to high school before it gets to the point where they all think that they know it all already and they're great. And, you got all the politics with the college level stuff. I just didn't want to be involved in that. So I just went back to high school.
So I remember you saying you reached back out to, I think, a couple of the Annandale assistants, and that's how you got your first opportunity in high school?
I did. I went back to Bob Hardage,
Hmm.
and coached defensive backs at Annandale, and you just continue to learn from him and his coaches. That was a great time, and I contacted Bob Herb at Oakton, Jimmy Powell at Stonewall Jackson. So yeah, I did go back and hit up the Annandale alumni, and the people that I knew from Annandale. But ultimately, it was, if I'm going to coach, if I can coach with Bob Hardage, I'm going to coach with Bob Hardage, and that's what I did.
So when did you get your first head job?
I coached with Bob Hardage Annandale, then I went and coached at got a PE job out at Chantilly, so naturally I had to do that. I needed to start making some money. I coached with Danny Meyer out there at Chantilly, and Mark Bendorf. And then at the time I was at Chantilly, the Falls Church job came open. And I had known Donna King, who was the assistant athletic director at that time at Chantilly. She was now the athletic director at Falls Church, and I really liked her. So it's not your ideal position to apply for. They had the longest losing streak in Northern Virginia at that time. But it was a great opportunity. And I tell everybody today that you learn how to coach, and you learn if you're a good coach by going to programs like that, working with the kids that couldn't get in the stands. But you get to see it. When the first game we won, it was like the kids that won a Super Bowl. There's nothing any more rewarding than something like that.
Well, but with Falls Church, it's not like you're at Woodson or Robinson, Annandale, these schools with this great tradition. They hadn't had much success in football. X and O's are going to be important, but how did you change the culture and get them to expect to win? And the fact that you guys, we can do this, we can win.
Well, I don't know that. Well, number one, I always felt that the kids at Falls Church they wanted to belong. They wanted somebody to believe in them. My first day of practice, I don't know if you know Bill Hall at Sharando. He was, I talked him into coming there and coaching with me. He was the head coach at Sharando. We show up the first day of practice. We only had 15 kids that actually had a physical and could practice. So the first day, I said, you know what? I said, guys, I want your practice day is you go home and you find a friend and you bring them back with you tomorrow, and then we'll practice. And so the next day we had like 25 kids that we started practicing. But I know Bill, he said to me, he goes, after the first day, he goes, I said, holy cow, what did I agree to get myself into? Because, he was coming from a dominant program of Strasburg to a school, to Falls Church, 70% minority, and only 15 kids with a physical. But we got them competitive at Falls Church. And I tell you, that is probably, other than winning the state championship, that was the most rewarding time of coaching that I've had. Because the kids, once you show that you believed in them, they would do everything for you. I had a 135-pound offensive guard that was Asian. I mentioned earlier that he had to go to immigration hearing. His parents didn't even know that he was playing football. A lot of the kids we had in the Asian community, it's not, you're working, you're studying and you're working. and some of those kids' parents didn't even know they were playing. But that was great times actually at Falls Church.
So when did you end up going to Woodson?
Well, I went to Woodson after Falls Church. I loved Falls Church, but also wanted to get myself into a situation that was, I wouldn't say more competitive, but at a higher level, which was Woodson. But at that time, they also were, I think, 0-15 or something.
Was it right?
Virginia.
Who was the coach? Because I know they had, when I played and you played, I think was it Coach Cox that was there?
It was Coach Cox. Yes.
Coach Cox.
Well, the head coach at the time, well, right before I took over, was Paul Labazetta, who ended up coaching for me too for many, many years. I owe him a lot. He was our defense coordinator when we won state championship. But I went to Woodson because I wanted to step up. You know, you're playing your Robinsons and your Westfields, and and it was a big step. And I'll never. James Madison just kicked the crap out of us all the time. But I learned a lot at Woodson, going against the bigger schools, and who was a big influence on me was Tom Verbanek. And I would, if I had questions, I would call, and Francis Dahl. I don't know if you remember Francis.
Lake Braddock AD,
Yeah.
Chantilly AD, but he was coaching at Lake Braddock when I was
coaching at Lake Braddock, yeah. And so there was a lot of guys that helped me with advice and things like that. If I had questions, I would talk to them, and they were a big help. And so I would say, transition-wise, Woodson was the best place for me, and I learned the most at Woodson.
Right. So at some point you decided to go to Prince William County. Was that after Woodson?
That was after Woodson. The reasoning was I lived out here in Prince William in the Gainesville Haymarket area, and the commute was just getting more miserable year after year. And I had 2 young kids, and it was just, you know what, I got to get closer to home to spend more time with my wife and my 2 boys, Cody and Kevin. That's the reason why. I knew that there was a school while I was at Woodson. I knew there was a school that's opening up out here in the Haymarket area. So I had hopes in my eye on that to make that transition out here, because I wanted to be closer to the family and the boys. I was really tired of making that commute, but it worked out really well for me.
So it's, when we were in school, the Prince William kids, I remember we knew kids from Woodbridge and Garfield. It was more country. They had some tougher kids. They were a little more hard scrabble than the Northern Virginia, like the Fairfax County kids were. Little different demographic. What was the demographic like at Prince William County when you were there? By then, it was probably just more like one big suburb. Did you feel the kids were different, or were they the same as the kids you coach in Woodson and at Falls Church?
Well, the cultural makeup was different, and it is, and it was back then. But I'll be honest with you. When we came, it wasn't just me. I brought Coach Labazetta. He retired from Fairfax, came out here and taught at Battlefield, coached for me. I had a couple guys come out here from Fairfax, and when we start coaching against and playing against the Prince William County schools, we always said to each other, and this isn't going to sound great, we always said to each other, as they got a boatload of athletes out here in Prince William County, but doesn't seem like that they're coaching them up as much. There's more of let their athletic ability win the games for them. When in Fairfax County, we just had more of your average hard-nosed kids that we knew that we had to coach them up. So we always felt like Fairfax County was more about fundamentals and technique in Prince William County was more of let the athlete do the work and just let them play, let their ability win for you. That's kind of how we felt when we came out here. And I will say that, yeah, somewhat that is kind of true, because there are some great athletes out here in Prince William. A lot of them, a lot more than I had known about. I didn't know there was that many great athletes in Prince William County.
Well, and also, how do the different counties, Prince William and Fairfax, treat their coaches and their teachers? Is there anything, is it about the same, or does one county get it right more than the other?
I don't know. I think both counties got their issues. Now, if you compare, well, and you probably know that Prince William still doesn't have too many turf fields.
That's right.
You go to Fairfax, that was a priority that they put turf fields in all the schools. More middle schools have turf fields than high schools do in Prince William County.
That's interesting.
And Fairfax has changed in that aspect as far as who's controlling their fields too.
That's right.
Prince William, when I came out here, was all the fields was controlled by the parks. And at the time, Fairfax was making tons of money off of their fields from the youth leagues and everything else. With Prince William, all that money went to the parks and not to the school. But that has changed in Fairfax since then. But if you take, but as far as the importance and the competitiveness, no, it's Fairfax was more of a priority for their fields and stuff like that. But I don't think, each place still got their issues. And each place still has their pluses. But now, you ask questions that can get me in trouble. But I will say that you can go to other counties and other areas of the state to where you can see there's a huge priority in athletics where you're at compared to where you come from.
Yeah.
I don't know if that made sense, but without saying any negative things, but you go to some areas, nice facilities, it's a priority. But then when you come to maybe some around here, you can see it's not as big of a priority.
Yeah.
And a lot of people will go to other areas because athletics takes a back seat to everything else, which is understandable.
Well, so I do this regular panel of some of the top high school basketball coaches in the area. We just talk about the issues affecting coaching. And I asked them, would you guys like a model like in Texas or in Florida or down south where they pay public school coaches a lot of money to coach kids, and they get the value because your coaches are putting a whole bunch of time in. They're not making a whole lot of money on the time that they put in, even though they get paid back in other ways, of course. And I was surprised. The coaches, they pretty much said, look, we would do this for free. We don't do it for the money, but the money is pretty terrible. And I said to them, I'm like, well, I didn't say this to them, but I felt this way. I didn't have time to get into it. But I'm like, just because you do it for free doesn't mean it's right. I think if the coaches are providing value, I cannot tell you how much I've learned from my coaches, the things I still use in everyday life. A lot of the success I had in life, a lot of it goes back to the coaches that I've had, not just in high school, but in middle school as well. Would you like to see a model where coaches can make more? Coaches don't have to retire. They don't retire when they're 50 because, the incremental money they make in coaching is not worth the money they lose. They're not making enough extra money to make it worth it anymore. Would you like to see it changed?
Well, I think, Julian, I think the people in charge do know that the coaches, just like teachers, need to get more. But then when it comes down to budget time, what's more important? Who's going to get the money? We don't have the money, extra money, to spend on coaches. And to be honest with you, that's one reason why you don't get a lot of quality coaches. is because, we had people, and I know that we had people coming up from the Richmond area applying for jobs, the beach area, come up apply for jobs because maybe they're retiring down there or something. I don't know. But they come up and then they sit down and they talk and they see what the pay is, and that's not negotiable, I believe. And maybe Alexandria, which is only TC Williams, but it's a set pay scale. Why would you, if you're a top coach in the state of Virginia, come to Northern Virginia to where you're going to be making, $6,000, $7,000 for coaching?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a tough sale, and a lot of people turn down jobs in this area because there is a set scale, and you're not making nearly as much as you would down in the beach area, maybe a Richmond area, one of the bigger schools, where some areas you can negotiate your salary as a coach.
Yeah.
But, it makes it harder, but at the same time, like you said, we all would do it for nothing. But then maybe a little bit of the arrogance comes in and people want to go somewhere else and make what they think they're worth. But I would say most of the coaches you got around here, they would do it for nothing.
Yeah. Some of your best basketball coaches, best basketball minds are in the game, but not coaching in high schools, doing private training, they're running other AAU programs. And I think if the coaches made more at the schools, these folks would have coaching jobs at schools, but because they can make much more money in other ways, that's what they're doing in basketball. I don't think it's the same in football, but it's definitely like that in basketball.
No, it's not like that yet in football. But it's slowly, you got your AAU football now and you got other things going on. So it is slowly moving into that direction. But now I would love to see the coaches get what they're due to try to keep, you can't keep coaches around anymore. Mm-hmm. When you throw in the dealing with parents and all the legalities of everything nowadays, why do you want to be the head coach that's only getting paid $6,000 to deal with all its headaches? You no longer can you just go out and coach the kids and teach them important lessons. There's so much other going on that, especially if you're a teacher, that's part of your contract. Do I want to jeopardize a teaching position that's supporting my family by saying the wrong thing politically to somebody out on the basketball court or the football field? I'm not going to make that sacrifice for $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 when my bread and butter is a teacher. So it's hard to get teachers to coach now.
That's interesting. Well, let's get to your one of your shining moments of your career, which was your state title at Battlefield. I believe it was 2010. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just talk a little bit about that year. What made it different? And I guess everything had to come together when you win a state title. And maybe if you can, if it's worth it, compare it to your 78 title with Annandale.
Well, first, I guess now that you mention it, there is some similarities because it was Bob Hardage, the coach then in 78, which I learned everything from, which I used for the 2010 team. So there are those similarities. We had which I felt in Annandale, we had hard-nosed kids that believed in each other and they would go to war for each other. And those kids grew up, played youth leagues together here, all went through the Gainesville Grizzlies, the youth league out here. Brothers. We always knew at Annandale that if the oldest brother played, every brother after that wants to play. And as long as you have the same kids from the same family coming through that want to continue to keep playing for you like their older brothers did, then you're doing something right. And that's the way it was out here at Battlefield. We got these kids, their older brothers played, the younger brothers played. They all went through the youth leagues together. So it was like a big family. Come out here to Haymarket and Gainesville. It was a big family. and the kids all loved each other. They played hard together. You didn't have to worry about dissension amongst anybody on the team. No fighting. And those guys, we loved them to death because they were so down to earth and proud of each other. They would fight for each other. I loved those kids. So there are a lot of similarities to that aspect, and I would like to think that I brought that here from Bob Hardage. I still read the pregame speech that Bob Hardage did. I still read that every week here at Battlefields, and preached the same thing that Bob Hardage preached, and it was very successful for me. And over time, you start switching things around and doing your own little thing, but I guess he gets a lot of credit. And that group of kids from 78, they get a lot of credit for what I have done all the way to 2010 with the kids that I had. Mm-hmm. And believe it or not, I still ran Annandale plays from 1978 and 2010, and we won a state championship.
Yeah.
So a lot of credit goes to those guys, Coach Hardage. Now, what was the other half of that question there, Julian?
No, you nailed it. But I was going to ask you, any of those
playing wise, you asked me, but I had the chance. I always tell everybody, I had the opportunity to play at UVA. I always tell everybody, I never lost to UVA. Which, when I was playing at Tech, we won at UVA. When I played the championship in high school, we won at UVA. So I have good times. You might not believe it, I actually enjoy UVA.
Yeah.
So no, it was good. But the 78 team, I was so young, a sophomore. Mm-hmm. I probably didn't enjoy it as much as the juniors and seniors.
Right.
Phil and Ronnie and all those guys. It was still new to me as a sophomore, and I was naive to everything. I just did what Coach Hardage told me to do. So I wasn't at the level that the older guys were in 78. I mean, that was huge. And imagine being a senior your last year and you win the state championship. That's a whole lot different than a sophomore at that time, because you had all that time and effort put into it, and then you win it your senior year. That's pretty good for you. I mean, not that it wasn't good for me, yeah, but I think their last opportunity, their last year, that it meant tons to those guys. And at the time, I was a young, naive sophomore that didn't really know what was going on. Mm. But and I appreciated it probably more now and after I left than at that time.
Yeah.
I don't know. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah. Put less pressure on you. What do they call it? Triumph of the uncluttered mind. Sometimes.
Yeah.
You don't know. You just go out there and do it.
Just go out there and do it. You don't have time to think about it, and I was so young and so naive that I guess a little sheltered, that I probably didn't understand the magnitude of the moment like those guys did.
Yeah.
But that Battlefield, I never saw Bob Hardage get nervous. But nowadays, you walk him down the sideline, you can tell how tight the head coach is. But I always remember he was calm, collective, and he always said that if you're out of control or you are showing that you're nervous, the kids are going to be nervous. So, I never saw him nervous, never would have thought he would be nervous. And I guess I kind of tried to handle myself like I don't remember being nervous for the state championship game in 2010. Mm-hmm. I mean, we're actually talking about it. We walk out on the field, we see the other team, and we're like, Coach Johnson, I look at each other like, holy cow, this is going to be a long day, because you look at the tons of athletes and how huge, you're in the state championship. But like Annandale, our kids just went about their business. They were having a good time. and did what they came there for and what they've been taught, and it worked out in our favor. But yeah, you know what? Now that you mentioned, there's a whole lot of similarities.
That's interesting. Well, we talked a lot about Coach Hardage's influence in your coaching, even today. And you talked about your assistants that helped you, and La Persetta from Woodson and others. What about the other coaches that you work for? Who had the most profound influence on the way you coach? Because you worked with some great coaches as well as Bob Hardage.
Well, Dick Adams carried on same philosophy pretty much as Bob Hardage. So working for Dick, I learned a lot, but they were still a product of Bob Hardage, who he says a product of Ed Henry, which that's where he got it from. And I always told him, I said, but Coach, we didn't know Ed Henry like we know you. You coaches, not Ed Henry. He will never stop trying to give Ed Henry all the credit. I would say that I learned a little bit from each head coach. Danny Meyer at Chantilly. I got more. I would say I got more of not the X's and O's, like, because I was a defensive back coach. I got more from Danny Meyer about the motivational techniques, practice stuff, more administrative stuff, how to handle yourself with the kids. I mean, yeah, Bob Hardage, but I learned a lot from little teeny tiny things that make a difference at practice during a game. So I thank Danny Meyer for just the little motivational things, because he was a great motivator. Danny was, along with being a great coach. But I learned a lot from Danny, and actually probably never told him that, but hopefully he gets to hear it. Learned a lot from Dick, Danny. I worked with Coach Bendorf. Coach Bendorf was kind of a quiet coach. I'll let the assistants do most, a lot, which a lot of head coaches are like that. And maybe that was early in Coach Bendorf's career, so I guess it was kind of new to him at that time too. And actually, Steve Francis, who coached with us with Danny Meyer, with Mark Bendorf, is coaching for Greg Hatfield now, and he's working with him again, which is a lot of fun. But I would say that I learned most of my non-X's and O things from Danny Meyer. And yeah, sure, the lessons of life. I'm talking lessons of life from Bob Hardage and fundamentals technique. But when Danny, it came down to is how to get the most out of the kids. That's not the X's and O's, which was very good for me.
Well, I also read that one of the reasons why you got back into coaching, and I guess Prince William made it easier for you to coach, and it wouldn't affect your retirement, or I forgot exactly what the program was, but one of the main reasons why you got back into it was Coach Hatfield was coming up from, I believe, Culpeper. Who's Coach Hatfield, and what's his style like?
Well, Coach Hatfield, when I started being the head coach at Battlefield, I used to run a big man camp out here at Battlefield. And we played, when we first started off, we were playing Fauquier High School, which was where Greg was coaching at that time. And he brought his kids over. We actually had Sorrentino from Hilton, Stonewall kids there. We had a nice little big man camp going on. And I got to know Greg at that time. And he was old school. He's old school back then. Very successful coach. He had a success at Fauquier and at Eastern View, where he came from now, a lot of success at Eastern View. He'd been around, and I liked Greg. I liked his coaching philosophy, the way he approached the kids and the game. And when I decided to not coach, there was really only one person that I was going to come back to Battlefield and help coach, and that was Greg, because I liked the way he was. I like him, and I liked his football. So that's one reason why I came back. I kind of had talked to Greg about the job, and it worked out. Well, he had a couple opportunities, but it didn't work out. Because he has some daughters and some sons out there in Culpeper, playing in high school. Yeah, you want to be with your family when your kids are and going through high school. So things didn't work out, until recently, and I'm glad that they worked out. And I was like, you know what? I do want to coach with Greg again. I don't want to be in charge. Certainly, I don't want to be that guy anymore. But I always thought that I would enjoy coaching with Greg, and I have.
Yeah, he gives you some cover to focus on the game. He can take care of all the other stuff.
Oh, when he asked me to coach, I said, Greg, I don't deal with parents. He goes, don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. He goes, that's my job as the head coach. So I said, all right. If there's anybody has a question, I'm just going to direct them to you.
Yeah.
And so it's worked out really well.
Yeah. Well, Coach, this has been great. I just have one question for you. I love talking football with you. What is the key to the survival of football? I mean, obviously, certain areas of the state and the country are having a hard time with participation. The game is seen as overly violent sometimes. But it is a part of our culture. I mean, I love talking 70s and 80s football. I mean, most of my podcasts are about basketball, but I love talking football from our generation because I grew up watching it and loving it. What do you think the key is so we can maintain this and we can have football for a few more generations?
Well, I don't know, Julian. I think it's gone in the couple bad directions. And then you have all the controversy with the concussions, which hasn't helped. But I will say that kids play football a whole lot differently now than we used to. Kids are conscious of not using their head. It is a much safer. The kids are getting faster and bigger, which impacts are a little bit more violent now. But safety wise, I think it is a whole lot more safe now than it was.
Is that right?
I think so. Kids don't use their head to tackle anymore. Yeah, you're going to have an occasional head-to-head contact, but you don't see that like you used to. Kids don't lead with their head. I think it's a much, they've changed the lineman blocking rules and stuff. There's no high-low. There's, you can't clip kids anymore. There's a whole bunch of things. And it is a much safer sport now than it was. But at the same time, I said, yeah, kids are getting bigger, they're getting faster, which maybe balances all that out. But I will say that that is a whole lot more safer now than it was when I played or in coaching my early years. So to parents, you're always going to have your accidents. But I think the coaches do a great job of keeping the sport safe now. And that's not what parents see. They just see or hear about kids with the concussions there. And even now when a kid gets a concussion, they go overboard sometimes to make sure that kid is healthy and ready if he can, to play again, to participate. So I think they do a great job with that now. And as a parent, I wouldn't be hesitant to let my kid play. I think the problem now is more the younger levels. I wouldn't be in a hurry to get my kid into youth league football until maybe 7th, 8th grade. That's my own opinion. But I think when there's a lot of flag league now, which is great for the kids. But I don't know that. I mean, I started playing full gear when I was 6 years old.
So
You
did I.
know,
Yeah.
that's not going to happen anymore.
Yeah.
But I don't think I'm not real comfortable with the young kids going out and playing, and maybe when the coaches aren't as well. They're number one, the kids that age are still awkward. Physically they're awkward, and they might have a little more injuries. But I like the age of 6th, 7th, 8th grade before they even get to preferably 7th, 8th grade, when they're starting to physically get bigger and stronger, and they're taught correctly. I don't think what you teach a kid when they're playing peewee is going to be carried over to later years. They're just out there running around bumping into each other. But I do like for them, and they're doing a good job in the 7th, 8th grade level with safety now as well, and youth leagues are doing better. But I don't know, Julian. I don't know that it's a thing that can be recovered. And it's a shame, because we learned so much, and same thing with basketball and everything else. We learned so much through the athletics. I really don't know. I honestly, the TV now glorifies everything. The college level, then the NFL level, everything that it's involved in football is glorified. Bob Hardage, we weren't even allowed to have any pads. We couldn't, no towel. I mean, you couldn't have wristbands. You couldn't have anything. You just look like Penn State out there all the time. By old days, Penn State. But I don't know. I think because of all the negative stuff that came along with the concussions, and then you got COVID. A lot of schools don't have freshman team. The numbers are going down as far as participation. It's going to be hard to recover. And I don't know that there's anything that can be done. I mean, our coaches, Coach Hatfield and all the coaches, they're hitting the middle schools, talking to kids, going to the youth league games, things like that. You do your best, but in the bottom, then when it comes down to it, a lot of times is you got to convince mom that it's a safe sport for their kid to play, which it is now. It's getting more safe every year, and that there's a lot that can be learned through football or the sport that you're choosing. And Julian, I go back a little bit to what we've talked about earlier about I played 3 sports. A lot of kids used to play 3 sports, 2 sports. I'd like to see more kids doing more sports, which is a competitive thing. I had a lot of pride in Annandale and in Virginia Tech. I wanted to contribute, play multiple sports, because that was my competitiveness in me. I think kids are losing that competitive drive a little bit. I would love to have, if I was a baseball coach, I would love to have the starting quarterback on the mound for me, because he's used to the spotlight. He's used to the pressure. Just things like that. It's not as common as it was. You win in football, lose in basketball, then you want to win again in baseball, or you lose in football, you win in basketball. Nowadays, it's just one sport, and it doesn't carry over into any other sports. Oh, well, you got me this time. Well, I'm going to get you in basketball. It's just a lot of the competitiveness seems to be gone.
Yeah.
And I would like to see kids get back. I'm not saying if you're terrible at something, we don't tell the kids that you got to play a sport. We want you to try out for one. If you get cut, you get cut. You're just not, you're not that good. But then you come back to football in the off season. I'd like to see kids continue to be competitive in all athletics. And I think there's, I'm not going to say, but who the coach was, but I had a kid on my receiver that was all district, very fast. Didn't play baseball, played in middle school, didn't play in high school. Then his senior year, he goes, "Hey coach, I want to go out for baseball." And this wasn't bad for him. And I said, "Oh, I'll talk to the coach." And the first thing the coach says, "Well, he hasn't been in the program." I'm thinking, wait a minute. You got the best athlete in the school want to come out for your team, even if he's just stealing bases, he's going to be an impact. He goes, "No, he hasn't been in the program or the summer league. No need for him to come out." That to me just makes no sense. And I want to see kids to be where they can contribute in other sports, help everybody, just enjoy the sports and be competitive. And I think we're losing that. And I think I just like to see that get back to the kids.
Yeah. Well, at least they can't take away our memories. It's been great. I think the kids that have played for you are very lucky because you carry a tradition from Bob Hardage from Ed Henry of winning, but also of raising young men, all these life lessons that you provided. It's been great. I've really enjoyed you doing this. I know you're coming up on a deadline here, but I really think it's been a great dialogue. You've given so much, and it's so great to hear the old stories. It brought back a lot of those games, those memories, especially tearing down the goalpost in the.
I'll never forget it.
Yeah, Lake Stadium. But look, let's keep in touch, and maybe at some point we can get you and Todd Kirtley, some of the old quarterbacks, on a call at one time. That'd be a lot of fun.
Well, anytime you want to ask me some questions, I'd love to.
Yeah, that's great, Coach. Well, look, thanks again for all the time, and have a good rest of your day. And let's keep in touch. Let's keep in contact.
All right, thanks.
Okay, Coach. Thanks.
Bye.